Well, Mr. President, of course, we are greatly honored that you came here to Schloss Leopoldskron to mark the 60th anniversary of the Salzburg seminar. And can I ask you to say briefly, what makes this event significant for you?
Well, it reminds me on the very important and positive role the United States played in the World War II to liberate Europe and Austria from the Nazi dictatorship and to bring the war to an end. And then the United States helped physically with food and care parcels, but they also contributed to building up the Austrian society intellectually and morally. And the Salzburg seminar was and still is a place for dialogue and for listening to each other, for learning to handle with other opinions and to answer on other opinions. And it contributed to the political and intellectual dialogue in Austria on the basis of American standards.
Thank you very much. Now, you just gave us a very stimulating lecture, which you called Europe Then and Now. And I wonder if you could summarize what you think is the most important change in Europe and in the world in the 60 years since 1947, and what do you think has been Austria's particular role in that change?
Well, it's interesting that in the last 5 years, for instance, we celebrated a lot of important historical dates and their 50th or 60th birthday. All started with the 60th anniversary of ending the war, but we also had the 60th birthday of the speech of Foreign Secretary Marshall for the European Recovery Program. We had the 50th anniversary of the Treaty of Rome. We had the 50th anniversary of the Austrian State Treaty. And that means that in the first year after the war, in the first years, it was just necessary to overcome hunger and destruction and catastrophe and all the immediate problems of World War II. But then, in the first 5 or 6 or 10 years after the war, it was also necessary to think about the structures of a future peaceful Europe and of the future relations between Europe and the United States. And Marshall and Schuman and other big figures in the post-war history laid the ground for a development which was very successful in Europe. Europe developed fantastically, but until the end of the 80s, it developed always in the framework of a Europe which was put into two parts, the East and the West, the communist system and the Western system. And it was fantastic and to a high degree unexpected, at least as far as the date is concerned, that communism would collapse. It would be more or less peacefully, and that Europe could unite again. So we have 3 periods. The immediate post-war period, as first period, then the second period where Western Europe and the European democracies developed democratically, very successful economically, but in a divided Europe. And then we had the third period, and still have it, where the separation between Eastern and Western Europe was overcome. Communism was part of the history. The European integration made great progress. And now a big and united, and economic, very successful Europe has dialogue with United States, so to say, on equal footing.
And do you think Austria has played a specific role in those changes?
I hope so. I mean, I'm an Austrian, and I would not overestimate the role of my country, but a very specific role for Austria was that Austria was occupied by soldiers from the West and from Russia as well. And it was a place of encounter and of dialogue. And the Austrian neutrality, as a consequence of the State Treaty, enriched our possibilities. And I think that in the 70s, in the 80s, Austria hosting many important international meetings, becoming a third headquarter of the United Nations, playing a big role in the OSCE negotiations, having a very positive impact on the dialogue, on the problems of the Near East, etc. Austria played a significant role, and many statesmen from other countries testified. And then we decided to join the European Union, what means that we are now in the group of the countries of the European Union. Our influence is inside the European Union. Maybe this has the consequence of a little less high profile in international affairs, but we are well arranged in the European family, and we're still very much satisfied with our economic and political development and with the development of the European Union as a whole.
And finally, Mr. President, I wonder if you could say what you see now as being the biggest challenges that are facing Europe and the world in this still new century, and what kind of role you think an institution like the Salzburg Global Seminar can play in helping confront those challenges.
Well, I believe that progress in politics, in technology, in transport, in information systems is such that we really have made progress from a continental policy to a global policy. Probably it's easier today to reach Tokyo or to reach, I don't know, New York than it was 50 years ago to reach Warsaw or to reach some points in Europe. So it's not surprising that we started to live in a political environment where most of the problems must be discussed and solved globally. This is for economic problems, this is for energy problems, this is for climate problems, this is for protection of environment problems, and therefore I find it logically and convincing that you say we want to develop the Salzburg Seminar to a Salzburg Global Seminar, and this indicates already the agenda which you probably will give yourself in the next month and years. And if I remember how useful and helpful the contribution of Salzburg Seminar on the European dialogue and on handling with European problems was, I have no doubt that Salzburg Global Seminar will have a similar positive impact and will present contributions to discussion and solving global problems. That's my answer to your question.
Very nice answer indeed. Thank you so much, Mr. President.
You're welcome.
Very, very honored to have you here.
All the best to Salzburg Global Seminar.